Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Attorney Henry Gornbein. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am very pleased to welcome as our guest Haley Burrell of the Schlutoter Hughes Law Firm, who will lead us in a discussion as to how legal planning and care coordination create peace of mind. Haley, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you so much for having me, Henry. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come speak on this topic.
Well, I look forward to hearing everything you can educate us on. First of all, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and your background?
Absolutely. So I'm an attorney. I have been practicing with the firm Schluter and Hughes since its inception. I'm a bit of a non-traditional attorney for the fact that I was a legal secretary who then decided to go to law school, which I think is very helpful in my practice, especially dealing with families, just because I can give sort of the practical application along with the legal analysis that's needed in order to execute and also, perform duties under these documents when we're talking about medical powers of attorney and financial powers of attorney.
So you already learned everything from the ground up, so to speak, because before going to law school, you got all the practical education as well.
I did. I think it was really helpful when learning how to talk to clients and to families and to understand that sometimes what people need in a time of need is just someone to relate. And I think practical experience can lend itself to be a helping hand in those situations.
Absolutely. First of all, why don't you tell us about medical powers of attorney?
Absolutely. So medical powers of attorney can be called many different things depending on who you're talking to. Sometimes they're referred to as healthcare powers of attorney. Sometimes they're referred to as patient advocates, like they are in the Michigan statute. But really, all this document is referring to is who you have named to make medical decisions for you in the event that you are incapacitated. Now, this is a big job. And this document doesn't take it lightly because in the state of Michigan, it is required that 2 doctors actually have to certify that you are unable to make medical decisions for yourself. So once that occurs, your medical power of attorney can go ahead and step into your shoes and start making those medical decisions for you on your behalf.
That's critical because more and more, especially now, people are living longer and they're having more and more medical issues. And I know of several situations where people have Alzheimer's and or dementia, and they need someone to really take care of not only their finances, which we'll get to momentarily, but also medical decisions. And one of the main medical decisions you see is whether or not there should be resuscitation, or whether or not everything should be done to save someone, or should someone be allowed to go peacefully, for lack of a better word. Haley, why don't you tell us about financial powers of attorney now?
So financial powers of attorney is the flip side to medical powers of attorney. This is everything that you can do in your day-to-day life. So oftentimes people think of a financial power of attorney as someone who can simply open a bank account for them, write a check. But really, this encompasses much, much more when you give someone this power. The ability to sign a deed on your behalf, file a tax return, communicate with the Social Security Administration, communicate with credit card companies. It's an everyday document. So you wake up in the morning and you do certain tasks. You log on to your bank account to check the balance. You may, attend a meeting with your CPA to discuss taxes that are, coming right around due. You could be writing a check to your township to pay for property taxes. The power that you give your financial power of attorney encompasses all of these tasks. When we talk about a financial power of attorney as well in the state of Michigan, unlike a medical power of attorney for which 2 doctors have to certify that you are unable to make decisions, a financial power of attorney is a little different. You get a choice. You can have financial power of attorney that is effective on signing, which means that as soon as you sign that document, that financial power of attorney can come in and help you out with those everyday tasks. I think that this is extremely helpful, especially in the age of that gray area of incapacity, that you can start to lean on your loved ones or trusted advisors or friends to do tasks for you. You can also choose to have a financial power of attorney that is effective on incapacity, right? So, two doctors have to certify that you're no longer to make financial decisions. This provides an extra safeguard, but less flexibility when the time comes.
So I guess, Haley, when do they come into play? I mean, you can prepare them, but it's the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And basically, they can sit for many, many years, or it's something that can happen almost immediately, depending on the circumstances. So tell us a little bit about how they come into play.
Yeah, so what we generally see is you go to your estate planning attorney, you get this big, beautiful plan, right? You sort of mark it off of your checklist for the year, and it goes into a safe, or the documents get uploaded to your computer, and you don't look at them until an emergency happens. Well, at that point, it tends to be a little bit too late, and that transition period can be chaotic. So, what we recommend, and what I think everybody should do, my practical advice over my legal advice, is really bring these documents into your everyday life before they are needed. Some ways you can do this is provide them to your medical, care professionals. If you have a doctor that's trusted, right? Start involving your loved ones in medical conversations. Put them on speakerphone when you're at your next physical. With your financial power of attorney, making sure that your local bank branch that you go in and you deposit checks to and every day have copies of them. This allows those documents to really start to work and be available to those who need them ahead of that emergency situation. We also have very much seen that it is helpful for your loved ones to have copies of these documents, especially that financial power of attorney, should the need arise that you just may want a little extra help. For example, in the day of credit card fraud, of phone scams and phishing, it sometimes is nice to have a power of attorney that can call a credit card company on your behalf and report fraud, or help you manage your day-to-day tasks. So while they may not come into play until an emergency, there are ways to really integrate these documents into your everyday life so they can be helpful to you.
Why don't you, first of all, how does one align financial, medical, and family resources? Tell us a little bit more about that, Haley.
Yes, so family resources are wonderful. When you have, a family supporting you, those players tend to be the default players that you add into these documents. While it's wonderful, we live in an age where a lot of seniors are solo seniors. We also live in an age where children or loved ones may be located all over the country. So when you start to bring them into these conversations, when you start to develop a plan, it is important to start sharing your information with those around you. Now, this can often feel scary. It can often feel like you are giving up control. But what you are doing is you are taking your control back. You are preparing those around you for what you would want and what you would desire. So when we talk about who we want to put in those documents as the decision makers, while we talk a lot about family members, it's really important to evaluate whether those family resources are appropriate. For example, you have two children, they're wonderful. One, however, would be willing to pull the plug on you, a week after you've bruised your ankle. The other one would say, nope, you need to keep him as alive as long as possible. So it's important to really be honest with yourself and think, are family resources what I need in this moment? or perhaps an independent third party.
Family dynamics, what can I say? They're fascinating. Having specialized in family law for over 50 years, it's like anything's possible. And now one thing we have that we didn't have a few years ago is the ability to connect family members all over the country, so you can have conferences with everyone. The problem is, and this is something you must see in your practice, how do you get everyone on the same page? How do you get everyone agreeing? For example, with a medical power of attorney, it might be a situation where mom says, I do not want to be resuscitated. I do not want, everything done in the event that something is happening to me. Well, another family member will say, no, I don't agree with that. We don't want to let you go. And, even with regard to finances, there can be disagreements, or often siblings don't trust each other. So it's like, can you do a power of attorney where one sibling is given control over certain aspects, like perhaps bank accounts, and another one is handling investments? Or I'm just throwing out some ideas for you to expound on, Haley.
Of course. So divvying up the tasks based on strengths. Let's talk a little bit about that within the medical sphere and within the financial sphere.
Sure.
So medical powers of attorney are only effective when you are incapacitated. So often it's an emergency or a dire situation. There is nothing in the statute that precludes you from having two patient advocates. However, for all of the reasons that you just stated, Henry, sometimes it's not the best idea. So when a doctor comes out and they are making those end of life decisions, the last thing that they need are two sisters that can't agree on the sort of pain relief measures for their mother or ventilation for their father, right? So when it comes to a patient advocate, my best practical advice is try to name one. Try to name someone who may be more local or may be more available, perhaps not the son that has the high-powered CEO, position that tends to only answer at 9 p.m. on the weekdays. When it comes to financial powers of attorney, you can get a bit more creative. Perhaps you have a son who is an accountant, but dealing with, personal relationships, dealing with, day-to-day tasks is not for him, right? But he understands the nitty-gritty need for a balanced budget. Well, then perhaps you let your daughter have the tasks that are more day-to-day and allow your son to be a co-power of attorney with her to come in and do more of those mundane tasks that he enjoys. We've also had where you may have a daughter who you very much want to be your financial power of attorney or your medical power of attorney, but quite frankly, she's going to need some help. You can also name an independent person, someone who is not a family member, to come in and be a co with them, to assist really on those administrative tasks that they might not have the desire or the time to do.
Haley, when should these powers be put into place? I mean, it's like it's all part of an estate plan, and I guess an easy answer is the sooner the better. But tell us from your experience what you recommend to clients.
So I think it's helpful to understand that when you become 18, when you turn the age of 18, when you become an adult, your parents, those loved ones that have been default in your life, are no longer able to make those decisions for you. That continues from the age of 18 through the age of 95. We don't have people in our life that are defaulted, perhaps a spouse, but perhaps, that's a complicated relationship, able to make those decisions. So our best piece of advice is everyone needs them, because what happens if you don't have them and there is a disagreement? If you don't have these documents and there's a disagreement of what should happen for your end of life decisions, unfortunately, that disagreement ends up in probate court. And what we have seen over countless times, over countless court cases, is those decisions get drawn out. Those decisions go through the court systems. People are hurt emotionally, sometimes physically, through the process of having to wait for the court of law to decide their end. We also take a look at what happens if you do not have somebody named. The court is able to appoint someone to make those decisions for you through guardianship or conservatorship proceedings. Conservatorship over your finances, guardianship over your personal and medical decisions. Now, the court is going to decide who those people are based on an order of priority. So first spouse, then children, and then we kind of go down the family tree. Well, that's wonderful if those would have been the people that you would have named already. But if they're not, you have all of a sudden lost control of that decision. And while judges and courts do an excellent job of fact finding, sometimes their decisions aren't what we would have made for ourselves. So it is imperative that you take it upon yourself to make these decisions ahead of needing them. That way, there is no other involvement other than you and your attorney and perhaps trusted people in your life.
Well stated, Haley. I mean, the adage I've always gone by is if you can make decisions, make them yourselves or make them family members. The last thing you want is a stranger in a black robe who does not know you, who may mean well, but often comes to the wrong decision or perhaps a decision you don't want, even though that may be the legal decision. So don't give up power. And this is what a good estate plan does. It gives power to you, it gives power to your wishes, and gives power to family members. How do we build a professional family of trusted advisors, Haley?
Well, first, I think it takes an honest look at where you are at. So we've already decided within this conversation that everyone needs a basic estate plan for all of those reasons. So finding an attorney that can really fit those needs. A lot of questions that I receive, especially in this age of technology, is, well, can I find a form online? They have, a statutory power of attorney that I can print off and decide who's going to make those decisions. Well, that's all well and great. But if you do not have someone with the contextual background of why you are doing these documents, why you are making these decisions, quite frankly, those decisions are hard to defend. Should there be a question of, is this really what mom or dad would have wanted or grandma and grandpa would have wanted? So my first step is always to find an attorney. We are all over the place in all sorts of different nooks and crannies of the world, and have an honest conversation of where you are at, where your family is at, where those personalities are at. I'm sure, Henry, we've all sat in a client meeting where the kids are wonderful and the grandkids have never been better. And, you start asking about, your child's, spouse or your daughter-in-law. And all of a sudden, little comments start to percolate to the surface, right? Being able to have those open and honest conversations with somebody who's trusted and somebody who's privileged, quite frankly, can be very helpful. What's also important along with an attorney is some sort of financial advisor, some sort of medical advisor, whether that's a physician that you've been going to for 20 years or a specialist that you can really bounce some of these situations, some of these ideas off of, and some, trusted advisors who have your best interest because you have done the communicating with them. It doesn't help anyone if you go to your physical, right, and say, no, everything's fine. I've never felt better. And don't discuss the knee injury that's been bugging you or perhaps the heart flutters. So building that trusted team While it's great to say, well, I have an attorney, I have a doctor that I trust, if you aren't having those open and honest conversations with them, they aren't as helpful to you as they could be.
Haley, let's say I've come to you thinking about an estate plan. Take us through the initial interview of what goes on. Let's have an actual process.
Mhm.
Someone's made an appointment with you. They're saying, I'm not sure what I need. I don't know if I need a simple will. I don't know if I need a complicated trust. What about a durable power of attorney? What about a medical designation? So take us through that initial consultation.
Absolutely. So when you come generally to an attorney or to our firm, what practitioners normally ask for is some sort of balance sheet, some sort of list of brief assets. So they really know what we're working with. What are we passing? When are we passing? To whom are we passing them? It's not to be nosy or to be judgmental if perhaps we could, have saved a little bit more or cut a little here, or, we really, really love our new vehicle. It's to know what needs to be done with the assets after you have passed. What we also like to do here is kind of get an idea of your family tree. So I always ask, who's close, who is available, how are the kids, how are the grandkids, how are the in laws, to get an idea. So, really, to be prepared to have these conversations, it's good to have put a little bit of thought. But that balance sheet and that family tree is very much going to be helpful to sort of lead the discussion. And I really think that your initial consultation, as much as it is for me to learn about you, it's for you to learn about estate planning documents in general. Everybody always comes with a different level of knowledge. Maybe you have prior estate planning documents that you're looking to update. Those are helpful to have. Perhaps you've been to a talk and you have a brochure that you really want to discuss about the differences between wills and trusts. Bring that material so we can have a robust educational conversation, because the more educated you are, the easier it is to make those decisions and develop a plan.
It's interesting, and what impresses me about your firm is the fact that you approach things from a multidisciplinary background,
Thank
because
you.
you not only have attorneys, but you also have people, nurses, and people in the medical fields. And I think it's a very holistic, very impressive approach.
Thank you.
Tell us some examples of some situations you've been involved in that would be of interest to our viewers, Haley.
Yeah. So thank you for that. We always say we went to law school. We didn't go to medical school, thankfully. So we realized that in this age of distance, of family members, of loved ones, or of solo seniors, what people were very much lacking was an advocate for their everyday life, their medical decisions, their medical history. So often we go into these estate planning, conversations, and all we want to talk about is the assets. Well, there's a long life to get between, disbursement of those assets and your everyday life. So some ways that people have come to us and have found it helpful are a lot of solo seniors, perhaps people who, for one reason or another, are sort of by themselves, and they are starting to need extra assistance. Perhaps they're going to these medical appointments and they cannot remember what prescription that doctor said, because I cannot remember. Who can remember with all these huge names? And they just need somebody to attend and be a second ear. We also have our care coordinators and our and our physician's assistant go in and do home assessments, which I find to be particularly helpful. Perhaps you have an aging parent or grandparent, or perhaps you yourself are aging and you don't know if this environment that you are in, this home, necessarily the safest place to be, to age in place. one of our care coordinators, one of our medical professionals will come out and they'll do an assessment for you, and they'll tell you what they see based on their medical lenses. Perhaps you have a lot of furniture that needs some spacing out. Perhaps we could really start bringing in a lazy boy with a lift. Perhaps maybe our medicine cabinet isn't stocked as well as it should be in the event of an emergency. These are all small ways in which our team can walk alongside you as you age, as you have this journey of life. It's also helpful in medical emergencies. Perhaps you've named your daughter who is across, the United States in California. And you have fallen and you are in an emergency room in Beaumont. One of our care coordinators can come out, can be helpful in reading over the discharge plan and being that conduit between family members and you as a aging person.
What are the costs involved in a estate plan? Give us some ranges, just a general idea. I'm not trying to pin you down, but give.
No, you're fine. So absolutely. So we work here for our estate plans normally on a flat fee. Basic ranging, if you just want to come in for an 18-year-old plan, right? Powers of attorney, things of that, from anywhere between $895 to the most complicated trusts you will see at a top range of $5,000. So it can be affordable for those who are looking, and it's really based upon your needs. I would recommend everybody always having powers of attorney at least, and then having your other estate planning documents walk around with it, come along with it. As far as our care coordinators, what is wonderful is you do not even need to have an estate plan to utilize those services, an estate plan with us. You can call one of our care coordinators and hire them completely independently, or you can be a fellow attorney or practitioner who may need some assistance in their role as patient advocate. You can utilize them to help you in those roles. They do work on an hourly rate. So as much as you need them, they're there. As little as you need them, they're there. You can make it affordable to fit your needs.
Haley, we're down to a few seconds left.
Mm-hmm.
Before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts you would like to share with our viewers?
Yeah. So first, Henry, I want to thank you so much again for having me. This is my first podcast experience, and it's been wonderful. I would really challenge all of your, your following to really take a look in 2026. We're in January, fresh starts, new goals, and think, is this something that we need to accomplish this year? And if you don't have one in place, challenge yourself to reach out to an attorney, to a trusted advisor to start the process. It's never too late. And having, it at the beginning of the year, New Year resolution is always a great way to start the new year.
Start the year right. And as you said at the beginning, it's a way to create peace of mind as you move forward with the rest of the year. Haley Burrell of Schlutoter Hughes, I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Grain. Of course, I want to thank our viewers and our sponsor, and of course, Bloomfield Cable. Thank you so much.